Stan McMacken and Tim Bell and Melanie Drayton. Look at that.
Test, test. Bob, you there?
I am here.
Got you, Lima Charlie.
All right, let me turn on the video. There we go. There I am.
I'm happy to take notes.
Oh,
Thank you, Barbara.
thank you. Exactly. Thank you. And hello, Tim and Austin as well.
Good evening, guys.
Hey, Tim. Good evening.
Hey, Dan.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Austin.
Hello, Barbara. Good evening.
Thank you. Hi.
And Austin, welcome to the FinCom.
Guess what
Thank you.
exists in the world, Dan? Someplace else. Sun.
I've heard that. I've heard that. You must have seen it. Is it rumored or is it down there in Kiowaso?
It's real.
It's real.
Every day for a whole week. Sun and 75.
Well, you got some good color. You look fully decompressed from that Florida living.
Thank you.
And
Good seafood.
that's what they said
even
about
better.
Nixon too, right? He's back, tanned, fit, and rested.
Yeah. Yes, President Nixon.
Trying to count on my fingers how many people we have here. Vanderslice, Bell, Beatty, Drayton, Deborah Warren. Technically, we have a quorum, but let's give it another minute or two.
Hi, Melanie.
Are you in town, Melanie, or are you off somewhere? You are on mute, or your lips are moving, but we're not hearing anything.
Can you unmute her?
She's not on mute.
Oh,
It could be on mute on her computer, not on
Yeah.
Zoom.
Way up.
hi.
There we
you
go.
Okay.
Hey, Molly.
Now you can.
Yeah, that's much better.
I didn't do anything. I've been having this problem all day. For some reason, my mic on my laptop is going in and out. I probably need to get IT. I might need a new laptop.
Ooh, that sounds like a good excuse for.
Buy it quickly.
Yeah, exactly.
True, true. Well, this would be on the company, not me. So,
And no worries. Buy a fancy one.
right.
Are you home or are you in San Francisco? Where are you?
I'm home.
Oh, good.
I'm home. Yeah.
Speaking of quorums, when does Peter know what the results are for his position? Peter Barba.
You mean for moderator?
That's
Yeah.
election day.
That's going to be election day. Yeah.
It's sometime in April.
Huh, okay.
I think it's the week before town meeting. Is that correct?
Town meeting's not that early, is it?
No, that's in May. I think it's in mid-April,
Let's look at the calendar.
like April 14th or something like that.
Well, we talked about it with him. Well,
Right, I just can't
actually,
remember what he said. I was curious.
So he will have a good guess after the close of nomination papers, if he's the only person nominated, but he won't know because a write-in candidate could win.
True.
A good point.
And I know we talked about this, but I forget what the answer was. So if he wins the election, will he be running this town meeting?
Yes,
Yes.
you will.
He's going to have to be a quick study, he said, and
Yeah.
have the textbook beside him.
Yeah,
And maybe Dave too.
Dave waiting in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
wings.
He's working on his jokes already.
I know
Oh,
that,
God.
that's an important part of it, is being avuncular about the whole thing.
He's not as
Okay.
avuncular. Avuncular isn't his shtick, I don't think.
But it's definitely Dave's
It
shtick.
is Dave's. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But
Okay, let's see. It is 6:35. We do have a quorum, so we have Vanderslice, Bell, McMacken, Beatty, Drayton. We'll come back to our two guests in a second. Allison has joined us. Deborah Warren is here, so that's a quorum of the Finance Committee. And we are joined by Chief Furlong, Chief Antrim, and Allison, the town accountant. And Allison, I just want to note that I spent the afternoon in a meeting with a gentleman whose last name is Nieto.
oh,
And he is Peruvian. Oh, no, Allison's staying on mute. All right.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself. No relation to me.
No, and what nationality is your name derived from?
My husband's Colombian.
Okay.
But as far as I know, he doesn't have relatives from Peru, but maybe distant.
mhm.
Where
I
in
don't know.
Colombia is he from? I lived there for a year.
He was in Bogota for
Yeah.
most of the time.
Yeah, it's
Um,
cold there.
I know. When I went to visit for the first time, probably 5 years ago, we went to Bogota and we went to Cartagena when we visited.
Cartagena is beautiful and warm. Bogota is,
Mhm.
All right. Anyway, we have a set of minutes that we can approve if we have a motion.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
And
a
that
second.
includes the correction.
Yes. I
I'll second.
corrected. Thank you for that, Tim. Made a little difference. Just a few zeros.
Just a few zeros here and there. Okay, all in favor, and I'll just read them off. So Tim,
Aye.
Dan,
Aye.
Barbara,
I,
Deborah,
Aye.
Melanie,
Aye.
and Vanderslice votes aye. So unanimous vote in favor. I don't know of any other administrative matters.
did we ever approve and vote on your minutes? I don't,
Did I ever actually?
I've never seen them.
I've never seen them.
I have them, but I haven't circulated them, so I will circulate them and we'll do it tomorrow.
Next time,
Okay.
Next time.
tomorrow even.
Yeah, or tomorrow even. Okay, so it's police and fire on the agenda for this evening. And Dan and Barbara, I'm just gonna turn this over to you. And
Barbara, would you like to go first, or I can kind of tee things up?
Why don't you tee things up? I like
Sure.
that phrase.
Terrific. But Barbara and I visited both police and fire departments and had very fruitful and positive discussions with both chiefs. And there was a lot of similarities between both of their budgets. They both are really showing a positive willingness and ability, some real skills to keep their departments spending in a fashion where they can provide the public safety that we need, and at the same time recognize the fact that we're in the wrong. The town of Nahant is basing, this is my opinion, not theirs. The town of Nahant is basically on the wrong side of the economies of scale for public safety. That being said, we have too small a town to have all of the features, people, processes, and procedures that would be found in a larger town that had better funded departments, which means that both of our chiefs have to use a great deal of resourcefulness in their scheduling. As we start at fire, Chief Antrim has done an amazing job of expanding the call firefighter program. He was hoping to expand it more. We were the town budget, as we are evaluating it, as our town leadership has published it, gives him half a loaf. It gets him halfway there of what he wanted for more call firefighters. And the objective would be that these call firefighters wouldn't just show up, that they would actually stand duty or stand watches. Because right now, if there's a fire in town, and I don't need to remind anyone that we live on the ocean, and the houses are on extraordinarily close centers, and they tend to be made out of highly flammable materials. Oh. So that said, when and if there's fire, we have 2 firemen at the firehouse ready to mobilize. They are ostensibly prevented from entering a dwelling that is engulfed in flame because not the actual law, but the protocol as recommended by the National Firefighting Institute, or a similar organization that's widely recognized, is that 4 firefighters should be on the scene. So 2 go in, 1 to rescue the other should he become entrapped. And then a second team stands by ready to rescue the first team. And we've all remember what happened in the city of Worcester, where they failed to observe this protocol. So basically, our firefighters are not always religiously observing the protocol to our own risk. We have a good bit of risk with a firehouse that has 2 men in it, and the call firefighters coming in. The expansion of the call firefighters to stand staff duty in the firehouse means is a big positive benefit, and the chief was able to do that without having to be a budget buster killer. But the view from 30,000 feet is, for time immemorial, since we have adopted this program of salaried professional firefighters backed up by call firefighters, we have had a fair bit of risk given the centers of the dwellings, the construction of the dwellings in town, and it is kind of a tough mission for the chief, very tough, and we have risk. There is definite risk out there. I don't know that it's widely articulated in town, but when demographics were a little bit different, there were many men in town who were eager to be call firefighters, as close to a volunteer fire department that you'd find in a rural city. And there would be people that would show up. Right now, because of employment circumstances and demographics, we don't have a lot of people in town or within 1 mile who are ready and capable of being call firefighters. So we have a shortfall in that area. So as we've relied on the call firefighters, we have a greater and greater challenge to put firefighters in those trucks and on that apparatus. We have a greater challenge to man and staff our equipment, and the real other exposure point is, I calculated several times per month, there are concurrent calls. So call 1 brings 2 firefighters and possibly call firefighters to the scene of the incident. Call 2 gets put on hold and is told to told to stand by until we can sort it out. So that is another aspect of this risk. Overall, it was a terrific meeting with the chief, and I'm amazed at the great job that is getting done with some pretty limited resources. And my belief is that a lot of townspeople are unaware of the ongoing exposure that we have to a major hideous conflagration, and we don't want to be in a post 3-alarm fire situation. We haven't had a lot of multi-alarm fires in the recent past, but if you flip a coin long enough, it'll come up heads. That was our visit to the fire department when we went. Why don't you cover police, Barbara? And
I will, but first I'd like to add that the other issue, that was excellent. Thank you, Dan. Really good summary. The other issue is the EMT calls.
yes,
And so we do have a lot of those. I mean, like the day we were there, Chief Antrim, you told me we'd had like 3 or something often in one day. And that's continuing. And then that means those people are out. So what we need to realize is the EMT calls put a lot of strain.
And
Um,
it's the full-time firefighters at the station that are responding to the EMT calls?
I think so. Isn't that correct, Chief Antrim?
Yes, that's correct. The two on-duty staff currently staff the ambulance. So anytime there's a medical aid, it takes our only full-time staffing out of town for about an hour and a half each medical.
Yeah, and you have a lot of those. I mean, even the day we were there, right?
Yeah, it can be sporadic. We can go 24 hours without one, and then some days we might get, like you said, 3 to
Right.
as many as 5 or 6.
Right. And our town is aging. So that's the other challenge in terms of staffing. Why don't we go ahead and have Chief Antrim present now, because we've had this introduction, and then I will introduce Chief Furlong after we've had Chief Antrim's presentation.
Before we go on, I want to ask a couple questions about risk. So what is the risk? And I'm kind of mentally dividing that into 2 parts. There's a risk in responding to an incident, right? So I mean, I guess the worst that can happen is there's injury or worse. But there's also, is there risk to the town just in being in this predicament? Can somebody raise some sort of an issue that would force additional staffing, force additional capability? Did that question make sense, Austin? Chief Antrim, sorry.
Good. Well, staffing can't be forced. Every community decides what level of fire protection they're able to afford and are comfortable with. What I think has happened is that what started out as fire department staffing has grown into other areas of responsibility, mostly operating the ambulance, but also ocean rescue calls, hazardous material calls, code enforcement. There's a whole plethora of activities that have been added to the plate. The largest demand is the ambulance. That takes our staffing out of town frequently. So it's really, I want to use this meeting as sort of an opportunity to educate what our staffing actually is versus what the standards say we should be staffed at. and then hopefully continue to make that case to the residents so they can decide what level of staffing they're willing to support, because we are operating far below standards and have been for decades, really. The staffing model we have in place has been in place for over 100 years. I really did a deep dive on the history of the staffing, trying to determine, how we got to where we are today with our staffing, and what changes in the town occurred to add more full-time staffing. And what I found was it was largely reactional, meaning reacting to things going on generally in society. So the first full-time staffing that was added because the fire apparatus became motorized and they didn't have anyone who could drive it. So they added full-time staff whose job was to get the fire apparatus to the scene. And they started with one full-time firefighter, quickly realized that one firefighter can't be on duty 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So they added a second, and then a third, and then a fourth, and eventually leveled out between 6 and 8, depending on budget difficulties. And then it really became solidified at 8 full-time employees when the fire department took over operation of the ambulance. And that was to have 2 on duty at all times to staff the ambulance. But really, it is primarily a fire department. We have a couple $1 million worth of fire apparatus in the building. But the staffing is nowhere near, the staffing for fires is nowhere near where it should be given the population density in this town. So if anyone has any more questions now, I'm happy to answer them, or I can sort of get in depth describing.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
The staffing is the first priority over any equipment. Is that correct?
Budgets.
It's, yeah, I mean, for me, it's sort of the most important factor. It's also the most expensive factor. The equipment, we've been, the town has been very supportive, and we've been very fortunate with grants. So equipment-wise, we're in very good shape. The 2 biggest things that I see as a problem are, the staffing and the building. And funding was approved for a building study, and that is a committee has been formed, so that will be getting underway shortly. Building is still, as we discussed with Barbara and Dan, probably many years off. But and one of my hesitations in even applying to this position was knowing that the staffing in the building are such big issues, and the town, it may not have the capacity to overcome those issues, at least, anytime soon. So, but over the past 3 years, I've been studying the staffing issue for well over a decade. In fact, I don't know if Bob remembers. He may be the only one who was on the committee 10 years ago. But
anyone old enough? Is that what you were?
No. Who has volunteered as long as you on the finance committee. So, I and a few others on the department made a presentation 10 years ago, sort of trying to draw attention to the problems we're anticipating with what we saw as a diminishing call department, because our staffing model relies heavily on part-time firefighters. And that has been on the decline for over a decade. And, I'm barely, even a great deal of my time every year is spent trying to recruit new call firefighters, going through the hiring process. Then, we have to get them new gear, which is quite expensive. It's about $7,000 just to get a new hire prepared to attend the fire academy. And it's about 2 years of training before a new call firefighter is really useful to us. So we sort of have this constant cycle of trying to hire and train people, and then some quit, some get hired elsewhere full time and move or leave. And we have a number of older call firefighters who, have been on the department a long time. This year, we're going to lose 3 of them because they'll be forced to retire due to age. So it's sort of this constant cycle of.
Austin,
Yes.
apologies for interrupting. Do
No,
we
that's fine.
have anyone in the hiring process right now that's in the academy?
We had 4 new call firefighters graduate from the academy last night.
Oh,
Very excited about
congratulations.
that. Thank you. And yeah, I've begun, I'm sort of constantly taking applications, but in the next month, I'll be pushing out more publicly that the hiring process is beginning. We'll get applicants, do our interviews, do background checks, and then physical exams. If they pass everything and can commit to attending the fire academy in the fall, which is a large commitment that we do not pay them for, other than reimbursement for mileage for using their personal vehicle. Yeah, it's a long process and it's a lot of work, but I do have a couple applicants right now. I also have one of the benefits of expanding these the call firefighters working shifts. There's a number of benefits, but one is that there are some other full-time firefighters who would be interested in helping us out on their off days, but they really need a schedule. Not everyone can just drop what they're doing at a moment's notice and respond to an emergency. So expanding call firefighters working on shifts will allow us, one, to hire from a wider area and give more consistent work. And I'll get into that a little more, what the benefits were when we did this pilot program this past fall with the $10,000 that we received last year for this. So that was a long-winded answer. Yes, we do have some applicants, but we
if we were to become compliant, if we wanted to meet the guidelines, become compliant with the guidelines, what would that look like and what would that cost?
So from everything I've analyzed and studied, and I've read dozens of staffing studies at other departments in the area, not just this area, but Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Hampshire, Maine. I've tried to find similar sized communities or departments. And I believe we need, in addition to the full-time chief, 12 full-time firefighters and 26 call firefighters. We currently have 8 full-time firefighters, and it's currently 16 call firefighters on the roster, but like I said, 4 of them just graduated, they're brand new. 3 of them just graduated last year. They're making progress, but not really fully released yet. 2 of them we're testing this Friday, hopefully to release them to drive the fire apparatus. And then the majority of the rest are, there's a couple who work full-time as firefighters elsewhere. So, they respond to incidents when they can, but, it's not often. And then, like I said, we have 3 that have to retire this year due to their age. So As for cost, I haven't done a full analysis on that. As far as the additional full-time staff, I believe we need, we're looking at least, another 500,000 annually for that. But I don't want to scare you too much. I do have a stepped approach that I've, sort of discussed with Tony and Allison and with the department on how to sort of gradually improve the staffing
And just, this is maybe a different way of asking the question I asked earlier. Yeah, I mean, yeah, okay, I get it. There's risk in responding to an incident. We don't have enough people to get there immediately, all the rest of it. What's the risk or what's the downside of not meeting the guidelines? Do people's home insurance rates go up because I don't know what it might be. Maybe it's nothing.
Right. So every few years, there is an organization, I think it's Insurance Services, something or other, ISO, that assesses every community's fire protection capabilities. And they provide a numerical rating on a scale of 1 to 10. Nahant has almost always been, I believe, at a 4, which is okay. When staffing was reduced in the 90s, that rating did drop. So there's been, somehow that rating is tied to insurance rates, but I've never been able to get a clear answer on, what the direct impact is. But I think what the real danger is, continuing to operate as far below the staffing standards as we do. Those standards aren't, they're not law, they're not regulated. I mean, in terms of, they're not mandated, I should say. But when there is a significant injury or worse, those are definitely the standards that we are compared to and held to. So there is risk, if there is some sort of catastrophic event, because outside organizations come in and look at every detail of the fire department when that happens. And I don't know if there'd be an actual cost associated with that. Usually what happens is, in the case of a firefighter line of duty death, there's an organization called NIOSH that will come in and assess the department and assess the incident that happened, and then they produce a report with recommendations. They point out all the deficiencies that occurred at the incident and all the deficiencies in the department, and then make recommendations on how to improve those things. Those are also reports that I and every other chief reads. There's a lot of great information in there about what areas to focus on for improvement, which we've been doing. We addressed our radios were completely inadequate. The town supported us with ARPA funds to replace our radios. So we now have a radio for every firefighter we have that will be operating on a scene. That's one of the big, communication is a big issue when often at fires. Incident command training, that's another one. That's something we've been focusing on a lot more with the full-time staff, and then incorporating that into our trainings so that the call firefighters also, sort of get a sense of how everything is organized. Sorry, I can ramble on, so feel free to interrupt with questions.
Chief Andrum, am I not correct that you do need a new ambulance?
We have one ordered, yeah. So the
Right.
town had approved funding for that at last town meeting. So
Right, that was
has
through
been-
ARPA funding, right? I think something like that.
ARPA funding was used to fund half of the new
Half of it.
fire engine that we took delivery of this past August.
And everyone should know the new fire engine is gorgeous. It's really gorgeous.
It's also reliable, which is
I know, but
our
it is,
biggest.
it is a
Yeah,
beautiful
the engine that
vehicle.
we got rid of. That was a happy day for me to get rid of that. That I had a lot of sleepless nights worrying that we were going to have to rely on that in a fire. And
So other than waiting for the ambulance, which is already on order, thank goodness, because it takes a long time, are there any other equipment needs? Right, there are, aren't there? I forget.
yeah, there are not as expensive as fire engines and ambulances,
Right.
But yeah, I had made 2 capital requests this year. One to replace the SUV that I use as
Right,
the chief
that's what it
vehicle,
is.
command vehicle.
Yes,
And I'd also requested money to replace the pickup truck that the fire department has, which we
Right.
use. That fills a lot of roles, but its primary role is in emergencies, is towing our watercraft to water rescue incidents. But it gets used for dozens of other things. And both of those are in rough shape. Tony and Allison, even though I had asked for more funding, particularly in the salary side, and had those 2 capital requests, I'm very grateful for the work that they did to uh, allocate what they have in their version of the budget. It gives me enough to improve things, not as much as I would like, but that's probably a good thing, because we don't, we have to sort of develop some new systems for scheduling the call firefighters and all that. So it'll take a bit of work to get that whole system really up and running. So I think the funding that they're proposing this year is a great starting point. Yeah, as for other capital needs, the only other sort of significant one, aside from the building, is the boat. The boat we're currently using was donated to us when our last boat failed. And this one has been great, but it's a little small for our use. We heavily adapted it. It was not, designed to be an emergency watercraft. So we added a lot of equipment to it, and that has, taken its toll on the boat. I don't even know exactly what the cost is going to be, but it's going to take a bit of money this spring just to get it operational for the summer. But a replacement boat is significant. I don't have an updated quotes. I don't want to throw numbers out, but over 100,000 for a new boat if we were to go that route. And that's not something I'm asking for yet. That's something I need to explore more and explore, well, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
And if it seems like this topic rolls around every 3-4 years or something like that, the ambulance. The way you described it earlier, the ambulance runs are really problematic, because that's pulling people not out of town for an hour and a half or something like that. So
Yes.
when was the last time we revisited the analysis of, does the town running the ambulance service make sense?
Well, that's something that I deal with daily, and I can expand on that quite a bit. One, I think the ambulance services, it's an outstanding service that's provided to the town, and I would never advocate for us not operating that. The private ambulance world has been really in turmoil since COVID. They have not, they have had significant staffing issues that, for the past 2 years, every Essex County Fire Chief meeting I attend, their monthly meetings, most of the chiefs that rely on private ambulance companies the ambulance companies are just not able to live up to their contracts. So, for example, the city of Lynn, they operate one paramedic ambulance, but whenever they have a medical aid, they send the closest fire unit to it. So they'll send a fire engine with 4 firefighters to the medical aid. They're all trained as either EMTs or paramedics, so they're certainly capable of stabilizing somebody on scene. But because they don't have transport capacity, they have to wait for a private ambulance. And what they were running into for years is that fire engine or ladder truck with 4 or 5 personnel on it will be tied up on scene for anywhere from 20 to 40 minutes in some cases, waiting for an ambulance to come and take the patient to the hospital, which is, 5 miles away, maybe. And I hear that from all these departments: Lynn, Salem, Saugus, Swampscott, Marblehead, Danvers, Peabody. All those departments don't operate ambulances, and all of them are having significant delays in patient care and patient transport because of the problems with the private ambulance system. Now, as for how we try and address that here is every time there is a call for medical aid, our off-duty full-time staff receive a notification on their phones, and if they're available, they respond to cover the station, well, to assist on scene and then cover the station while the ambulance crew is out. And really that's what our entire staffing model has been on. It's really relying on off-duty full-time firefighters and part-time firefighters to drop what they're doing and respond to emergencies, as quickly as they can get there. And that staffing model worked sort of up until the 1950s. They really started having a problem with it in the 1960s and onward, because society changed. People, not as many people are working in town, and people's lives are, parents are far more involved in their children's lives now than they were a few decades ago. So, just expecting people after they've already worked 48 hours in a week here to drop what they're doing and come back every time there's a call is just not realistic anymore. Most of our full-time firefighters work a second full-time job. So the town and the union, with my encouragement, have tried to incentivize the full-time staff coming to callbacks more in the contract, and that has had an impact. The past few years, well, particularly the past year, I've seen an increase in the full-time staff returning to cover the station. And, we've considered also including the call firefighters in that as well, at least the ones that are qualified, meaning that they're trained, they can drive our apparatus, and they're also EMTs. But we don't have a lot of those who are available all the time. Fortunately, with the 4 that graduated last night, 3 of them are EMTs and are working on ambulances, private ambulances already. So I'm very happy about that, because they'll be able to get integrated into our system a lot faster and fill those roles when the ambulance is out of town. But the challenge is, trying to make this system, this combination, it's called a combination fire department. So we have a combination of full-time and part-time staff. And we just don't have enough people, basically. There's not a large enough pool to get enough people back to handle the incidents that we're getting. That's the shortest version I can give, and I can get really in depth on what the standards are. And then, the standards for fighting a fire, they sort of set a few benchmark structures, and then list out how many firefighters you need on scene to handle an incident in each of those structures. So the most basic one is a 2-story single family residential structure with no basement and no exposures. And when I say exposures, that means no other buildings that are close enough to it that they'll catch on fire from the radiant heat and from the original fire building. So that standard baseline structure almost doesn't exist in Nahant. And you're supposed to have, by the national standards, 17 firefighters on scene in 8 minutes. And you're supposed to meet that 90% of the time. We've never even come close to meeting that. The most, and I went through and sort of pulled out the fires we've had over the past three and a half years. And the most Nahant personnel we've had on scene was actually at a fire just a few weeks ago. We had 11 Nahant firefighters on scene. We average 6 firefighters on scene when we have fires, or at least over the last 3 years. You know, so we're kind of grossly below standards. But you know, when I say that, all of the personnel does not have to come from the Nahant Fire Department. You know, we do rely heavily on mutual aid, and mutual aid does count towards you know, those numbers that we're trying to achieve when we have fires. But we definitely need to be closer than where we are with our own staffing, particularly because sometimes the causeway gets shut off or flooded, and that's becoming more frequent. And yeah, I do think 4 more full-time firefighters and then a call force of 26, roughly 25, 26 call firefighters is sort of the ideal number to get us close to where we should be staffing wise on a more regular basis.
Are there any other questions? Because you explained it very well. If I'm not hearing any other questions, we can move on to Chief Furlong and talk about police department and your requests and needs. And I want to emphasize that as we did with Chief Antrim, we had a very helpful meeting. Dan and I had a very helpful meeting with Chief Furlong, and Dan put it perfectly. The needs are so similar, the two departments, and I'm sure Chief Furlong will elaborate on this, but in terms of the staffing issues, again, not meeting what are supposed to be standards, and right, Chief Furlong, and you'll explain that. And therefore, having to have creatively sort of learned how to deal with that situation, which is not optimal. And what will also come up briefly will be an equipment need, which we are going to be able to meet. But Chief Furlong can tell you a little more about, for instance, with more staffing, there's an accreditation process and other things. So Chief Furlong, is that a good introduction, or is there more?
No, it certainly is. Listening to Chief Antrim, taking notes, and it's exactly the struggles that we're up against. I heard standards. I heard mutual aid. They have call firefighters. We call ours reserve officers. Our reserve officer pool has shrunk, much like the call fire department has shrunk. We fail to meet certain standards. That's at no fault to any previous chief or any previous administration. Several years ago, the Police Reform Act took a toll on especially small departments, whereas they came out with these great ideas, which the chiefs were behind 100%. However, there was no thought to the cost to achieve these standards. And one of the standards that we spoke of was, for example, going on a domestic violence call. In the police academy, they teach you a minimum of 2 officers, plus you're supposed to request a supervisor. We don't have that luxury. There's about 56 hours a week. Currently, right now, there's one officer. I just looked at the schedule. There's one officer on the road, and then there's one officer at the 911 answering the 911 calls. So if a domestic comes in right now, we're sending one officer, and much like the fire department, we have to rely on mutual aid. We do often call the Lynn Police. As you know, I worked there. They don't always have people to send, so we are forced to call Swampscott Police, which is a little bit more of a response time from them. Excuse me. The equipment very similar. However, we were very lucky. Our firearms are antiquated and failing. Mine specifically failed at the range on several occasions. And we were very lucky, as you all know, that we had a anonymous donation to cover the cost of new firearms for all the officers. So that was huge. Previously, I stood, quote unquote, stood in front of this board, and you guys were gracious enough to do a transfer for a dispatch console. As the fire chief alluded to, communication is huge. I can happily give an update that we should have that new console within a couple weeks. For those that don't know, we are still working on a portable radio at the dispatch center when a 911 call comes in, which is just not reliable. But that we got an update just the other day, so that ball should be rolling. We should have the equipment fairly soon. So that's a huge thing. Much of our reserves, much like the call firefighters, they work full-time jobs. So it's like cut and paste. They work 40+ hours. So if an incident comes in and we put out a page, we can't force them in. And they're all working. Some of them are retired. Some of them retired from other police departments doing 30+ years. They just do it to keep busy, and we can't force them in. And much like the fire department, if we have a major event, I'll put it on record that there was someone's going to force. I forget how it was worded, but we live in a litigious society. So if something happens due to lack of staffing on either end, you can guarantee that someone's going to bring a lawsuit. The recruit pool, as the other chief spoke of, it just isn't there. I know it's industry wide for whatever industry, but the reality of today's society is someone can sit at home, especially young kids, and get on their phones and become an influencer and make far more money than they can make in public service, which is it's a sad state of affairs, and it is what it is. So the pool for police officers, firefighters, EMTs, it's just not there anymore, which is a huge struggle, especially for small towns. We were fully staffed up until recently. We had to, as some of you may know, we had to terminate an officer. He got himself into some legal troubles, so we are now down an officer. We reached out, we posted the job. We were hoping to get another full-time trained police officer to alleviate the cost of sending someone to a police academy. It doesn't look that well, so we may have to send somebody to a police academy, and it's going to be a quick process with a background and medical, psychological evals. That academy starts June 2nd, so that our busy season, we're going to be down an officer the entire time. We will rely heavily on our reserves, but again, a lot of them work full-time jobs. They do overtime at their full-time jobs. So for us to force them in, we can't. We do force full-time police officers, which there have been several news reports, especially in Lynn, where the forcing is just out of control and people are just getting absolutely drained. They leave the profession to go to other professions. We're in a tough spot. Any public service agency, really. I could go ad nauseum, but it's exactly almost verbatim what Chief Antrim was alluding to. It's the resources just aren't there for us to get people in. Um, I don't know if you guys want to dive into my capital, but I think you guys all have our budgets in front of you, and there's a lot of red in mine, and I'm not used to it.
Well, tell us briefly. I know you're getting a new car, right?
Correct. So typically we put in for a new patrol car,
Right.
which when those come in, they run from 24 hours a day. So the initial cost of a police car, then you have to add at least $20,000 for the equipment that goes inside of it. Years ago, we could get away with transferring some of the equipment to alleviate some of the costs. Excuse me. However, years ago, I know we discussed this in our meeting. Ford had the Crown Vic, which was just a tank. You couldn't destroy them. So we started carrying the equipment over, and it alleviated some costs. They changed the models. We had to buy new equipment. Then they got rid of the Crown Vic completely, which I think was a mistake. And I'm not a Ford guy, as you all know, but they went to these Ford Explorers. Our first one, we had to replace, it was either the transmission or the whole engine. It was either the first one or the second one. We had to change them in both. We had nothing but problems. Our most recent one that we purchased, which was 2 years ago, we had an issue with it. We brought it over to a reputable repair shop, and they said the equipment that's in there that they put in from the factory is just made of plastic, and it's no good. You're going to be back. So they ordered a bunch of metal pieces. I'm not a car guy, but to me that didn't sit well. And I know we spoke of me purchasing Chevys, which were a little bit more expensive, but not that much more expensive. And the repair cost is far less on the Chevys. And also, on a side note, on the Fords, when we traded them in, no matter what condition they were in, we got a flat rate of $2,000 for a trade-in. We traded in a 2016 Chevy Tahoe unmarked, in that they gave us $6,000 for. So my intent this year is to purchase a new cruiser for me, drop what I'm driving right now back into patrol, so we have a secondary unmarked vehicle to operate with.
Can I ask a budget question?
Sure.
Yeah,
Um,
please.
So I noticed that the town administrator's budget reduces the educational incentive. I was under the impression that the educational incentive is kind of like a formula based on if your officers get master's degrees. And I didn't think you had discretion to pay less on that.
So you're right, it's contractual, so we don't have discretion. However, the amount of officers that we currently have, they don't all have degrees. So in order for someone to get a degree, it would be 2 for however many years down the road. So that's why they could cut some money there. Plus, currently we're down an officer, so we don't know
Okay,
what we're gonna get. But yes,
thanks.
Just to butt in too, the current year budget was based on, you had was it a lieutenant position that was vacant, chief? And we didn't know at the time when we were building this year's budget, the FY25 budget, it was either a sergeant position, sorry, was vacant. We didn't know who was moving into that position at the time.
okay,
And
yeah.
therefore we budgeted the education incentive at the highest level so that it would cover you. So that's why it looks like it's going down from FY25 to 26.
Thank you.
Any other questions? And Chief Furlong, is there anything else I mean, the similarities are so clear.
They
Is
serve.
is there anything else you think we should be thinking about going ahead into the future?
Much like Chief Antrim, I don't think we would need 4 officers, like he would need 4 firefighters, at least 2 to bridge the 56-hour gap, but it still wouldn't always put 2 officers on the street. So our schedules are funny that they work a 5 and 2, 5 and 3 rotation. So it's kind of difficult to really pin that down, but at least 2 officers in the immediate, but definitely not as many as the fire department would need.
2 more is what you're saying.
2 additional. And
2 additional, thank you.
correct. And unfortunately, like when we spoke, the backside cost of that is the insurance and the retirement and all the benefits, which we understand that. We're not shying away from that by any means, but that's where the big cost comes into play.
Chief Furlong, when you were talking earlier about responding to domestics and stuff, do you have the ability to have, I'll call it like a on call where, you know, before they actually get to the scene or whatever, another officer might be called in? Is that a possibility? I don't even know if it's a possibility, if you can do it, or
I think that would probably be contractual, where you're looking at like an on-call type person where they would probably have to get compensated somehow, even if they don't get called in. I'm only guessing.
Right.
Typically when the crap is hitting the fan and we do send out a page, say we need help, we do have officers that come. Like I said, we do rely on mutual aid. If it's a large scale event that's currently happening, we also have NEMLEC, which is the Northeast Municipal Law Enforcement Council. So I just literally have to pick up the phone and call North Andover Police, who will just dispatch however many assets they can to us. But that there's a delayed response in that. So
right.
Back to your original question, I think that would probably be contractual.
Okay.
Any other questions?
This is another Bob thinking out loud. I mean, I am frustrated and concerned. You're both describing a very similar problem. And it sounds like we've just come to the conclusion that we're doing the best we can. And I mean, how hard have we pushed on that? How hard have we tested that? What could we do? Are there synergies between the 2 departments?
As far as
I don't know.
yeah,
I don't know. Well, I mean, the one that I'm kind of popped into my head was, could the dispatch capability be shared, if not permanently, and made perhaps on a temporary basis? So again, I am thinking out loud here.
sure. No, I understand. That's a great.
If the fire department has to respond with 2 officers emptying the station, could the dispatch capability be temporarily switched to the police department, potentially buying some time or buying some personnel that could respond directly to the fire rather than responding directly to the station?
That is a great question. Something I thought of, Chief Antrim. I know you want to jump in here. The fire department has a completely different protocol as far as dispatching, because they work far better than we do regionally and with mutual aid. So I don't know, Chief Antrim, if you want to chime in as far as the fire dispatch.
Yeah. One, I'll just note that, our departments work together every day. The police also respond to medical aids as long as they're available, and they help us frequently. Even medical aids is, any other community around us that you go to, when there's a medical aid, you get, a full fire company on scene. So 3 to 5 firefighters who handle patient care until an ambulance arrives. Sometimes you also have police.
Right, but you don't need 3 to 5, really, do you?
Well, that I can touch on that too. So when you don't have that, you injure the people you have. So of our eight, well, of the nine full-time employees in the fire department, six of us have had surgeries in the last 3 years. Much of that is work related. We have another one waiting for a surgery, waiting for one full-time employee to return so he can go out and have his surgery. It's been sort of this constant rotation, and I think it's really almost a snowball effect of, when one goes out, that's two 24-hour shifts in an 8-day period that have to be filled by the other full-time staff. We've had a few instances over the past 3 years where we've had two full-time employees out at the same time. So the employees that are left are trying to pick up the slack and just getting more and more burnt out, more worn out, more prone to injury, less sleep. And then we're still expecting them to come back off duty, which, when they're already putting in 70 plus hours a week, they don't want to come back when they're off duty. But as far as the dispatch, the police are the 911 call center in Nahant, so they have to have someone at that desk 24 hours a day. We are different in that we have entered a regional contract with Lynn and Swampscott. That was many years ago. Chief Ward helped organize that. So we pay, Lynn Fire Department, has a dispatch center, and they always have at least two full-time dispatchers on duty. And they dispatch for Lynn Fire Department, Swampscott Fire Department, and Nahant. So, if a 911 call is received by the police department, and it's a fire call, and I'm not intimately familiar with how the process works, but they take information and then transfer the call to Lynn Fire Dispatch, who dispatches all the fire assets and handles our radio communications. So the fire department the Nahant Fire Department has no on-duty dispatch staff or capabilities. If that answers your question.
Yes. Then, no, that's probably too stupid a question.
If I can make just a couple more points. With our pilot program that we did with the call firefighter shifts, and that we are expanding if the town's version of the budget is passed, which would greatly expand our ability to have more of those call firefighter shifts. One of the biggest benefits of that is that the call firefighter and the junior full-time firefighter, when there's a medical aid, handle the transport, and it leaves the officer or senior firefighter back at the station. So we at least have somebody there. That's sort of the biggest benefit of having three on duty, is that, we can leave someone else in the building who has the training and experience to, organize the next incident when it comes in. And they mentioned receiving multiple calls. I've been tracking that. Last year, there were 35 days where we had simultaneous incidents. So typically it's the ambulance goes in a medical aid and begins transport, and then another emergency comes in, sometimes a medical aid, sometimes, an alarm, smoke detector activation, or it can be anything. But, we really need somebody here who can get to the scene, assess what's going on, and then organize everyone else who shows up, meaning the call firefighters. So having an additional person on duty sort of allows that to happen. And it also allows, what Dan was talking about, which I think is kind of a critical point, is it is law now in Massachusetts. Massachusetts became an OSHA state a couple of years ago. There's an OSHA rule that applies to firefighting, where you cannot send firefighters into a hazardous environment until you have a minimum of 4 firefighters assembled on scene. So having only 2 on duty, they get in a fire engine, go to the scene. You know, by law, they're not supposed to even enter the building if it's on fire. The only exception to that is if it's confirmed that there's somebody trapped in there who's alive that they could possibly rescue, which has happened in the last 3 years. In that particular instance, you know, when in the emergency services, whether it's police or fire, you know, when you learn listening to the radio traffic, you know, when something is sort of a desperate situation. And that one incident was certainly a desperate situation. And our 2 firefighters were in that building with police officers, you know, also assisting with a rescue with no protective gear. And it took almost 10 minutes before we got any other personnel on scene, including mutual aid. You know, and that's probably the closest we came to, you know, a really bad outcome. And I'm not trying to say that, you know, I don't want to leave in a completely negative note. The call firefighter shift program that we did this fall, I remember when I presented this last year, Melanie asked sort of what metrics would be used to determine if it's successful or not. And I was a little embarrassed that I didn't have that answer. And that was sort of because, you know, being so involved in the fire department, you know, I'm constantly thinking about the staffing, and I just know, you know, more staffing means better outcomes in almost every scenario that we go to. But I did track a lot of data on those call firefighter shifts, like the number of incidents they went to, the number of, you know, times that we were able to keep an officer back at the building while the call firefighter and the other firefighter were transporting. I think out of 50 shifts, they respond to 60 incidents. And another huge benefit that I hadn't really been thinking of is it takes so long for us to get a call firefighter up to the point where they're really useful to us. You know, the academy itself is 5 months long. You know, they're going on nights and weekends. And then when they come out of that, that's really, you know, I was never in the military, but I equate it to probably like boot camp. It sort of gives you a base level of training. It's really just a starting point or a foundation. So, you know, they know how to use all the gear. They're familiar somewhat with the tools, but they can't drive the fire trucks. They can't operate the fire pump on the trucks or the ladder truck. So there's a great deal of training we have to do with them once they complete the academy. And the way we were operating before, and sort of we're trying to transition away from it, but for the last 100+ years, all the department has offered is 1 monthly training that's 4 hours long. And you just can't get enough training to make people competent in that amount of time. Really, that 4-hour training is maintaining the skills that they've learned and then trying to build on that. But it's such a slow process. So one thing I didn't really think of, but there was a huge benefit, was when the call firefighters came on shift, the 2 full-time firefighters spent a large part of the shift training them on the tools, the apparatus, bringing them around town, you know, sort of training them to look at buildings from the perspective of the fire department, you know, sort of assessing what you would do, you know, if this building was on fire, and, you know, et cetera. Also learning the water system, where the hydrants are, what hydrants have good volume and pressure out of them, which don't. So in those 50 shifts, they you know, they completed well over 100 hours of training on these call firefighters, and that has allowed us to expedite that process. That's why this week we have a couple of firefighters that finished the academy last year that are likely to get released to drive the apparatus this week. Whereas, you know, if they had not worked those shifts, it would probably be another 2 years before they were proficient enough to drive and operate the fire apparatus.
Is
Um,
is mutual aid contractual, or is it like a best efforts?
So in the fire service, there's sort of two different things. There's mutual aid, and that is a well-established system. That there are written agreements between departments, and there are mutual aid. They call them run cards, so it's all laid out. And when you hear like a second alarm fire or third alarm fire, what that refers to is how far down on that run card you get in the mutual aid system.
Is there a cost for that?
No, no, and that's why it's a mutual aid agreement. So, and in our case, it's a little one-sided. You know, we rely heavily on Lynn, Swampscott, Marblehead, Salem, Revere, Linfield when we have a fire. But because of our staffing, we can't offer much in return. In fact, Lynn recently, in the past year, dropped us pretty far down on their mutual aid card just because we don't have enough full-time staff. You know, if they call us for an engine right now, we have to put out a page to all the off-duty staff and call firefighters, wait to see who responds. You know, we're supposed to not leave the town on mutual aid without 4 firefighters on the truck. You know, so we have to get at least 2 more back, and then more than that, you know, to remain back and cover the station. And it's very difficult for us to hit those numbers. So, you know, even though it's supposed to be mutual aid, it's, you know, in our case, it's kind of one-sided,
Yep.
which is becoming more of a problem. It's a little alarming that, you know, after a decade of being in the same place on Lynn's run card, we've now been dropped several positions because they know we're just not staffed well enough. But there is another thing that is not common in this area. It's much more common out west and in the south, where you can engage other communities to have automatic aid agreements. So with mutual aid, you have to request the help. So if we arrive at a fire and I declare it's a working fire on our run card, that automatically sends a Swampscott fire engine to the scene, a Lynn fire engine to our station. If I say, you know, if I escalate it to the next level, a second alarm, that brings a Lynn ladder truck and a Lynn engine to the scene and a Marblehead engine to the scene, and then backfills our station with other communities. And it continues rotating like that, you know, pulling further and further away, resources further and further away, you know, the more you need on scene. So, but other parts of the country use automatic aid agreements. So, so you don't have to request the resource. Lynn and Swampscott use this a little bit, or Swampscott does really. You know, if they have a call for a fire towards the Marblehead border, a Marblehead engine is automatically dispatched with the Swampscott fire apparatus. And if Swampscott has a fire that's towards the Lynn side, there's automatically a Lynn engine dispatched. So you can use those agreements to, you know, achieve more firefighters on scene quickly. But again, it has to be mutual. So we can't even entertain those agreements until we have more, you know, until we have guaranteed at least 3 or even 4 firefighters on our apparatus.
I'm sorry, I have a question.
Yes.
What is I don't understand the implications as you drop down in your run card status. When you get to the bottom or close to the bottom, what happens? I mean, if there's less and less reciprocity from us.
Yes. Yeah. When I say we drop down, it just means, you know, we're one of their closest neighbors, and they basically don't want to ask us for help because we don't have enough people and can't respond quickly enough. But you know, they're certainly willing to come here, and they do, which we're very fortunate for.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Question on ambulance. so we have ambulance that responds. Would we be able to call in a private ambulance to back us up so that they take and transport the individual?
Well, we do use a private ambulance company for our paramedic response. So we don't have any paramedics on our department. I wouldn't advocate for it. It would be extremely costly, and we just don't have the paramedic level call volume to sustain it really. However, I don't know, probably at least a third of the calls that our ambulance responds to, the paramedics get dispatched automatically for certain call criteria like chest pain, shortness of breath, altered mental status. There's a few others, but when a caller describes those symptoms, our ambulance gets dispatched automatically, and then private paramedics get dispatched. We used to receive a transporting paramedic ambulance with 2 paramedics on board because of the staffing issues that the private companies have had. We now only receive an SUV with 1 paramedic in it, which is not ideal, when you're dealing with a severe medical issue. But it's been working for us. That the good thing about that arrangement is they get here quickly, and the people they have staffing those are very experienced and they're fantastic. Yeah.
So just question money wise. So a private ambulance comes into town and takes somebody, I'll just say it takes, somebody with chest pains. The person or their medical insurance ends up paying for that, correct?
That's correct. Yeah. So we bill patients for our ambulance transports. And whichever agency actually transports the patient is the one that gets to bill the patient. So, for instance, in our arrangement with our paramedic provider, which is Atlantic Ambulance, when we request them, the paramedic will take over patient care, but we transport the patient in our ambulance with the paramedic taking care of the patient in the back. When that happens, we have a contract with Atlantic, so we pay them a flat rate for that service, and then we bill the patient. And I don't know, that arrangement, really works to Nahant's benefit. That is a huge cost savings, having that arrangement for us.
So are we able to bill for our ambulance service?
Yes, we do.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I think it averages, and Allison may have more updated numbers, but I think the ambulance revenue that we take in annually is around 160,000 or 170,000, and that's from about 300 transports roughly.
So how do you set the rates on that? Is that a standard rate thing, or is it something like, hey, we need more money for ambulance services? We're buying a new ambulance. Can we charge more?
Yeah, the whole medical billing thing is a mess. But so a former chief who had a lot more experience in the EMS world, or emergency medical service world, had changed how Nahant bills. So we used to sort of have a list of services. If we administered oxygen to someone, we would charge X amount of dollars for that. It was sort of a very inefficient billing system. So he had changed it to just sort of what most other ambulance providers do, is they just have flat rates for, if it's a basic life support transport like we do, there's a set flat rate. I can't remember what the exact number is. It might be like $2,200 or something. And then if it's a paramedic transport, that raises to somewhere around $3,000, I believe. And that does not mean that's what we actually collect. You know, there's
Yeah.
basically, yeah.
The insurance pays what they
Yeah.
feel is, okay,
Right.
I get it. Yeah, I didn't understand that, that we did have some income, and maybe more a question for Allison. So the money that is made on the ambulance, does that go into an account right back to the fire department? Or
It's
explored that.
general fund revenue money.
Yeah.
okay.
There is some fire departments that operate ambulances do have an ambulance enterprise account, where they collect that revenue and use it to fund the ambulance service. We did look at that. It doesn't make sense for Nahant. We just don't have enough revenue
Okay.
to fund the service.
So did I understand that if a paramedic is not needed, then 2 firefighters are going to bring the person to the hospital? But if a paramedic is needed, then only 1 firefighter will go with the paramedic. Is that right?
No, so if it's a BLS transport, yes, both firefighters go, meaning one's driving and one's in the back with the patient.
Mhm.
For an ALS level call, depending on the severity of it, one of our firefighters drives the ambulance and the paramedic, and sometimes the other firefighter are in the back of the ambulance giving patient care. If the other firefighter is not needed by the paramedic, then that firefighter drives the paramedic's vehicle to the hospital following the ambulance.
Okay.
Either way, we're still without both firefighters.
2 men down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just one other thing I wanted to cover, because I'll kick myself if I don't. As far as the full-time staffing, my approach to dealing with the staffing, and working with the union and the call firefighters is to continue build using call firefighters on shifts, supplementing the full-time staff. I think that is a good way to sort of bridge where we are now and where we should be. But in speaking with a number of other chiefs that have been in similar situations, or were departments that have started as combination fire departments and have moved towards more career staff. Linfield is one of those. There is a grant program currently that will pay for new full-time fire staffing. They'll pay 100% of salary and benefits for 3 years if you can get this grant. So Linfield received this grant last year. It's a highly competitive grant. We've never applied for it. But basically Linfield got what we would be looking for. So that they got a grant that is funding for new full-time firefighters for 3 years. There's no local cost share, and there's no requirement to keep those positions once the grant runs out. I mean, ideally, you would, ideally, the whole intent is to, for fire department, for that grant is for fire departments to get closer to adequate staffing levels, and hopefully to maintain them. And that's why they offer the 3 years, to give the community time to, figure out how they're going to pay for the positions once the grant funding runs out. So we've been working, preparing that grant application just to have it ready. In the event, the town indicates that they would support such a thing. So, that's something we're looking at. That's something I've discussed with Tony and mentioned, and Allison. But, that application period for that grant, it opens once a year. It was supposed to open last month, but because, of everything going on, it's been delayed. I don't believe the program will go away. I think they're just sort of reassessing it, but I do think that is something, we really should attempt to pursue. while we have the opportunity, because that's sort of our best chance, you know, to give us a little breathing room for a few years and get some better staffing. But getting back to the call firefighter shifts, what I learned from other chiefs who have gone through this process is, you know, and these are departments that have a more robust pool of call firefighters. But when the shifts start, they would see, you know, a lot of interest from the call firefighters. They'd be excited about it and fill shifts. But eventually, when the novelty wears off, they end up with just a small handful filling those shifts, and you have to restrict them, you know, to less than full-time hours to avoid having to offer, you know, health benefits and everything else. And, you know, as they get more experienced, you know, often they're getting hired by other departments. You know, we have had that happen quite a bit in the past few years where, you know, we spend the money to equip and train new call firefighters. Typically the ones that are applying are young and looking to do this as a career, and they think, you know, becoming a part-time firefighter will give them an edge to get hired elsewhere full-time, and in a lot of cases it does. So that's sort of the risk of relying on call firefighters on shifts is they're limited in how many hours they can work.
Excuse me.
And they're likely to get hired elsewhere. So you invest a lot of time and money in them and then lose them because they can get benefits more hours somewhere else. So that's why I believe ultimately we need to address this with full-time staffing. All right, I think I hit all the points I really wanted to make. If anyone has any other questions or anything specific about the budget this year.
So I have two more. I promise it's only two. One is, would a public safety building address any of the issues that we're talking about?
Not unless it came with a bunch of staffing in it already. I don't mean to be, you know, joking about it, but
Get the point.
yeah, the building is a
The building, not an
need
egg.
for both departments. I'm not sure, you know, the study will give us a much better idea of, you know, what might be the most appropriate approach to address the police station, the fire station moving forward. But I mean, the one thing, you know, one of the many reasons we do need a new fire station is, you know, the full-time staff lives here. They spend a large amount of time here, and you know, the station was not really designed to even have the two full-time firefighters on duty. So if we did eventually get more full-time staff in this building, that would be a huge challenge because we just do not have the space for it. So, you know, as the building process moves forward, we should be, you know, at least thinking of that, you know, not limiting ourselves to building it just to house two full-time employees. I think we should plan for some expanded staffing.
That was question one. So, and question two, this is directed at both of the chiefs. Are you satisfied you can live with the budget as presented?
I am. I'm very grateful for the work that Tony and Allison put into this year's budget process, and you know what they were able to provide. I know just the increase that they proposed was not easy to come by. So yes, I can live within this year's budget.
Really echo that.
Barring injuries and illnesses, which has been a constant problem.
Took the word right out of my mouth, Chief. Exactly. We can deal with this. It'll be tight, no doubt, but we can deal with it. And I definitely echo what the chief just said. We appreciate everything that Allison especially, but Allison and Tony have done. They showed us all the hard work they did behind the scenes, and it wasn't easy. I don't envy them, but we appreciate them.
Thank you. Anyone else on the committee?
Nope, I'm good.
All right, so that's, and then there are no other public safety representatives here, so I guess that's like it, right? Yeah.
Thank you
and
all
then-
for your time. I
oh,
really
you're-
appreciate it. I
you're
appreciate
welcome.
all the
Thank you.
work that you all do too.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you
You're
for
very-
everything you guys do.
Yeah, and not just, for the town, but it was extremely useful for us to learn in depth about the staffing issues. Very, thank you. And the fact that you're dealing with them, that's so critical for the town. Thank you. Not easy. Do we then, all right to have a move to adjourn, or is there anything else we need to discuss
Well,
tonight?
there's no members of the public present, so we don't have a public forum, so I think you're right, Barbara.
Well,
I would just remind everybody quickly, meeting tomorrow night as well, which is
Right.
DPW, water, sewer, enterprise funds, all of that.
Right.
And I don't know, who's the liaison?
That would be me, but I have been away, so I haven't had a chance to meet with Allison or Tony or Zach like I
Okay,
have in the past.
do Allison, Tony, and or Zach, they know of the meeting and are planning to attend? That probably should be directed at Allison.
Yeah.
So I'm aware of the meeting and Tony is. I'm not sure if Zach is aware.
Okay.
I can reach out to him and ask.
That would be helpful.
Yeah,
All right.
I guess I didn't realize that you hadn't met yet. Let me see if I can reach him via text. Do you want me texting? I said if I don't receive a response. Should I just let you know first thing in the morning?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, because I don't know if I'm gonna get a response if you guys are ready to adjourn.
And Bob, if I can ask, yeah, if I can ask, who do we have for next Thursday?
For next Thursday, school.
Cool.
Is planning also
Oh,
gonna be
yeah,
there?
school. Yeah, sorry, school and planning board.
I am the liaison with schools and I will be out of the country, but I'm going to speak with them and see if he can introduce himself and handle that. He's a great guy.
Okay. Yeah, that shouldn't be a problem. Planning board. I don't even, who is the chair of the planning board right now?
Rob Stein.
No, I
No.
believe it is
Sheila.
Sheila
Sheila
Hamilton.
Hamilton.
Sheila?
Yes.
Oh, right.
Okay, so all right, so I will let Sheila know as well.
I mentioned it yesterday to her.
Oh, okay, good. You've got it covered. Excellent.
And Bob, I know that Lynn Spencer reached out to you and,
Yes,
and-
I'm literally penning a note to her right.
and library is going to be a big part of that, as I'm
Yeah.
sure you're aware.
Yes. Would it be helpful to ask someone from the library trustees to attend as well? Is it
Well,
that big a?
It's a big deal. And so I'm guessing that Anne Spurn would certainly, probably, I can make sure Anne attends.
Haven't
I'm
we
guessing-
heard from her here? I'm not remembering right. from Anne?
I think last year we had both the library and the trustee.
Yeah.
So shall I reach out to Anne?
Yeah, I mean, yes, absolutely. If you think she would add something to it, yes.
I think she would. She's got long-term perspective.
Okay. Yeah, fine.
So what date do we have? So
March
when I
the 27th.
and will that be all of CPC?
Yeah, it's supposed to be all of the sub-articles, everything they have approved.
Yeah, I'm the liaison there, and they've done a great job of paring it down very clearly to what their sub-articles are going to be.
Good. Excellent.
And I'm the library liaison, and I know that that's going to be the really
They have a lot of stuff. Yeah, there's 3 or
Yeah.
4 things with the library.
right.
Yeah, and actually the 27th is scheduled for both community preservation and culture and recreation, which is when the library would normally attend and present. So absolutely appropriate to have someone from the library there.
I'll make sure that Anne, I'll ask Anne, and if she can't, if there's someone else she thinks would be good to come.
Okay. Send. All right, so I think, Barbara, your original idea of a motion to adjourn is in order.
Yes. I move that we adjourn.
I'll second that.
All right, quick roll call vote. Tim,
Yes.
Barbara,
Yes.
Deborah,
I
Dan,
Aye.
Melanie,
Aye.
and me, aye.
Peter, aye.
Peter, where did you
Yes.
go?
I'm
Oh, there
here.
you are. You're on the end.
Peter, did you second?
I did second that.
I thought
Yes.
so. That's what I've got. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. And Peter, actually, we had this discussion before you arrived. When do you officially learn whether your bid for moderator is successful?
That would be the election day. I guess the night of election, the night of the election. Yeah, as of the night of the election, when I get sworn in, if it's that night or the next day or whatever. Yeah, I would have to step down at that point. And just an FYI, I did do the Veterans Food Bank this morning, and I believe Dana had a conversation with Dave Conlon about backfilling Luke's position.
Oh,
Oh,
good.
great. Wonderful.
Yeah. Excellent.
Okay, and so town elections are the 19th of April.
Oh, it's the 19th. Okay.
Yeah.
No, I think
So-
it's the 26th.
Yeah, it's later than that. It's the 26th.
Mhm.
Oh,
Great. Even less time to get prepared.
You can start now and just be assumptive.
That might jinx it. I don't know. Although
No.
you have no rivals, right?
I don't know. Actually,
point?
I think I find out later this week. I think the 7th is the last date of
Was
file.
that an election question or a philosophical question?
Yeah.
A little bit of both.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so and yeah, I'm not sure if Dave was going to send him an appointment letter right away or but I think he's excited to get back on the committee.
Well, we need him anyway, whether you're,
Yeah.
we
So
need
you-
someone.
Assuming you are successful, you will have to resign from this committee
Correct.
effective whatever day you assume the moderator duties.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
I have a question to follow up on that. I thought Dana was on the housing authority.
He is.
So is he stepping down from that?
He is looking to step down. Yes.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
All right. Good. Then I think we're really adjourned now.
Right. All righty. Have
See
a
you
good night,
tomorrow.
everybody.
Thank
Have a
you.
good
Night.
day.
All right.
See you
See you tomorrow night.
tomorrow night.
Yep. Yeah.